Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are doing something a little different with the sources we have.
Yeah, we're definitely shifting gears a bit.
Right. We are putting on our spelunking gear, metaphorically speaking, of course, and we were descending into a text. And I have to warn you right up front, the deeper we go into this specific text, the stranger it gets. We aren't just wading in the shallows today.
No, it gets weird, but I would argue it gets weird in the best possible way.
Yeah.
We are looking at a map, essentially, but it's not the kind of map you pull up on your phone.
Exactly. We're looking at one of the most ancient narratives in human history. We're talking about the deathbed of the patriarch Jacob in the book of Genesis.
Right.
Now, usually when you read this story, that's Genesis 49 and 50, you read it as a history lesson. You have this old man, Jacob, who is dying. He calls his 12 sons around his bed.
The patriarchs of the 12 tribes.
Yeah. He blesses them, he predicts their future, and then he dies. It is standard Sunday school history. It basically sets up the geopolitics of the Old Testament.
Historically speaking, yes, that is exactly what it is. It's the formation of a nation.
But today, our mission is to take that history book and just, well, put it back on the shelf. We are picking up a very different lens.
A much more internal lens.
Right. We are looking at the commentary of Madame Guyon, the 17th century French mystic, and she looks at this exact same text, you know, the lions, the vines, the archers.
All that rich imagery.
Yeah, and she says, this isn't about 12 guys in the desert. This is about you.
And that is the absolute core of her approach. Madame Guyon was a major proponent of what is called the interior life.
The interior life. Let's define that for everyone listening.
So her premise is that the scriptures, while they are historically true, they contain a secondary, deeper layer of meaning, like an allegory for the spiritual journey of the individual believer.
Okay.
So when she sees Jacob blessing his sons, she doesn't see a family gathering. She sees a coded, step-by-step description of the human soul evolving.
And evolving from what to what, exactly?
From the state of multiplicity, which is this scattered, exhausting self-effort, all the way to the state of abandonment.
Abandonment. Let's pause on that word for a second.
It's a loaded word.
It really is. Because in our modern context, abandonment is almost always a trauma response. We think of abandoned buildings, abandoned puppies, abandonment issues. It's a terrible thing. But she uses it as the ultimate goal. Why?
It's a complete linguistic flip. For us, abandonment means being left behind by someone else. For Guyon, abandonment means you are doing the leaving. You are abandoning yourself.
Leaving yourself behind.
Yes. It is the process of ceasing to rely on your own strength, your own logic, and your own desires. You completely yield to the movement of God within you.
So it's about giving up control.
Exactly. It's the difference between rowing a boat against a heavy current, sweating, straining, panicking, and finally just putting up a sail to let the wind carry you.
I like that sailing analogy. But abandoning yourself sounds a bit like, I don't know, losing your identity. Is that the goal here, to just become a robot?
Not a robot, a conduit. She would argue you don't actually lose your identity. You find your true identity, which she says is hidden inside that deep connection.
Yeah.
But to get there, you have to lose the false identity.
The ego.
Right. The part of you that thinks it's completely in control.
Okay, so our mission today is to decode this map. We're going to trace the path from the way of multiplicity, which frankly just sounds like my daily to-do list.
Lots of us are living there.
Right. From there, all the way to this state she calls the mystic sleep.
It's a journey from frantic activity to absolute rest, from doing to being.
Let's start at the very beginning of the deathbed scene, Genesis 49. Jacob calls his sons. He says, "Gather yourselves together, that I may tell you that which shall befall you in the last days."
The last days.
Yeah, normally that sounds apocalyptic, right? Fire, brimstone, end of the world stuff.
Right, the eschatology.
Yeah.
But Guyon puts on her mystical glasses here. She sees the last days not as a geopolitical event or the end of the calendar. She sees it as the ultimate state of the believer.
The final destination of the soul.
Exactly. Jacob is about to reveal the secrets of the eternal kingdom. He is laying out how that kingdom is established inside a human heart. And to do that, he has to start with the first major obstacle.
Which brings us to the firstborn, Reuben.
Reuben.
Now, in that culture, the firstborn is everything. He gets the double portion. He gets the primary authority. You would expect him to get the gold medal here, but Jacob looks at him and just drops a hammer.
Pretty harsh.
Genesis 49, verse 4. Unstable as water, you shall not excel.
Brutal.
It is. I mean, imagine your dad's dying words to you being, you're unstable and you're never going to be great.
Yeah, that stings. But Guyon doesn't see this as a personal jab at Reuben's personality, does she?
No, not at all. She views Reuben purely as a symbol. For her, Reuben represents human strength and human effort, specifically the effort we exert to try to reach God on our own terms.
But wait, human strength is usually described as something solid. You hear, he's strong as an ox, or he's a rock. Why does Jeanne Guyon use water as the symbol for human strength? Well, think about the physics of water. Think about boiling water in a pot on your stove. When you crank up the heat, what happens?
It bubbles, it boils, it makes a ton of noise, there's steam going everywhere.
Exactly. It looks incredibly powerful, it's active, it's hot. But what happens the exact moment you turn off the heat?
It stops. It just goes flat.
And eventually, it evaporates. It completely dissipates. It has no permanent form of its own. Guyon is critiquing the kind of religious life that is entirely driven by the self.
The way of multiplicity.
Right. It's when you are the stove. You are pumping up your own enthusiasm, your own discipline, your own good works. You're constantly thinking, I need to do this task, or I need to feel this specific emotion.
It's very loud and active.
It is. But it's unstable.
Because you literally cannot keep the heat on forever. You'll run out of gas.
Exactly. It's like a manual hand pump for a well. You have to keep pumping the handle up and down over and over just to get the water to flow. The second your arm gets tired, the moment your willpower fatigues, the water stops. That is Reuben. He represents the natural man trying to do supernatural work.
Man, that is exhausting just to think about. It sounds like a fast track to burnout.
It is the literal definition of spiritual burnout.
No.
Guyon says this kind of effort is unstable as water because it just takes the shape of whatever container it's in.
Oh, meaning it's dependent on circumstances.
Exactly. If your circumstances are good, you feel super spiritual. If your circumstances are bad, you completely fall apart. You have no internal solidity.
And that is why Jacob says, you shall not excel.
Right. It's not a curse, it's just a statement of fact. You physically cannot reach the finish line running on that kind of fuel. Self-effort can never achieve that ultimate state because it's always about you trying to bridge the gap. Water eventually flows away. It cannot hold the first place.
So, if Reuben is the false start, the guy running on a treadmill and sweating but getting nowhere, who is the hero of this part of the map? Jacob moves down the line to Judah. And this, according to Guyon, is where the real interior life actually begins.
Yes, Judah is the major shift.
Genesis 49, verse 8. Judah, you are he whom your brothers shall praise. Your father's sons shall bow down before you.
So Judah represents the life where the divine is the true head within the believer. If Reuben is self-effort, Judah is the surrendered life. But there is a very subtle distinction here in the text that Guyon picks up on, which I think is absolutely fascinating.
You're talking about the difference between brothers and sons.
Exactly. The text clearly says, your brothers shall praise you, but then it switches to, your father's sons shall bow down to you. Now, poetically, you might just think those are synonyms used for rhythm.
Just ancient Hebrew poetry doing its thing.
Right, but Guyon says, no, there's a technical difference here.
Okay, let's break that down. Who are the brothers in this allegory?
The brothers represent what she calls godly people. These are good religious folks, but maybe they are still stuck in the Reuben phase.
They're still pumping the water.
Yeah, they are active, they are striving, they are doing good works, and they look at the person represented by Judah, the person living this deep interior life of absolute peace, and they praise them.
They're impressed.
Very impressed. They say, wow, look at that person. They are so calm. They are so holy. How do they do it?
So they're basically fans.
They are fans. They admire the fruit, but they don't understand the root of it. They praise the result, but they aren't actually walking that inner path themselves.
Got it. And what about the sons?
The sons of the Father represent those who have completely abandoned themselves to the supreme will. They don't just stand back and praise, they bow down.
And just to clarify, that bowing isn't about bowing to a human being, right?
No, absolutely not. Guyon says they are bowing to the divine presence within. It's an act of total worship. She argues that only the sons, the ones who have surrendered their own will, can truly worship in spirit and truth.
Because you can't really fully surrender if you're still standing up, so to speak.
Exactly. If you're still holding on to your own way of doing things, you aren't bowing. The bowing is the fundamental posture of a soul that has given up control.
It's really interesting that she draws a hard line there. It almost feels like she's creating a bit of a hierarchy. You have the brothers, the good, active, noisy folks. And then you have the sons, the quiet, surrendered, elite ones. It feels a little, I don't know, exclusive.
Mystical writings often feel that way. But she would argue it's not about exclusion. It's about invitation. She is inviting the brothers to become sons. She desperately wants everyone to leave the exhausting outer court of busyness and enter that inner sanctuary of rest.
Which perfectly brings us to the imagery of the lion, because Jacob calls Judah a lion's whelp. This is Genesis 49, verse 9. Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, you are gone up. He stooped down, he couched as a lion, and as an old lion, who shall rouse him up.
This has to be one of the richest images in the entire text.
Okay, let's dissect it. First off, a whelp. That's a baby lion. A cub. Why emphasize the baby aspect? Usually, if you want to project strength, you say, a mighty lion. You don't say, look at that toddler lion over there.
It is definitely a paradox. But Guyon argues that the term whelp specifically indicates the source of the strength. Think about it. A lion's whelp isn't strong because it goes to the gym. It isn't strong because it read a book on how to be a fierce lion.
Right, it doesn't practice roaring in the mirror.
Exactly. It is strong simply because it shares the nature of its father. It has lion DNA.
So it's genetic.
Spiritual genetics, yes. Guyon applies this directly to the believer. The person living the interior life isn't strong because of their own intense discipline. Remember, that would be back to Reuben's water pump.
Right.
They are strong because they share the nature of the divine. They've inherited it. Their strength is effortless because it's not generated. It's just their nature now.
That is a massive shift in perspective. Reuben is trying to build muscle. Judah just is strong because of his lineage.
Exactly. And because that strength comes from the divine, it is completely invincible. Guyon says this lion cannot be conquered. It's not human strength that could be worn down by a bad day. It is an unshakable strength.
And then there is this specific phrase, from the prey, you have got up. That sounds really violent, like a lion standing over a fresh kill with blood on its mouth.
It is violent, but in a strictly spiritual sense. Guyon connects this to a divine conquering force. She says this force flows within the believer and conquers heaven and earth.
So what is the prey in this scenario?
The prey is everything that stands in the way of that internal union. Sin, the ego, the distractions of the world, the self-righteousness. The lion has consumed it all. The victory is total and complete. But notice what happens immediately after the violence.
He stooped down, he couched as a lion, he just lays down.
Yes, and this is my absolute favorite part of her entire interpretation. She calls this the mystic sleep.
The mystic sleep. I mean, that sounds like a great name for an indie rock band, but what does it actually mean in practice for a person?
It is the ultimate state of repose. Think about a lion out in the wild versus, say, a gazelle. A gazelle is always twitchy, always looking over its shoulder, ears constantly swiveling. Why?
Because it's afraid. It knows its prey. It knows everything wants to eat it.
Exactly. Now think about a full-grown lion. When a lion is crouching or just sleeping out in the open sun, is it weak?
No. It's terrifying. You do not poke a sleeping lion.
Precisely. A lion sleeps safely out in the open because it knows it is the king. It has zero fear. Guyon says the believer who has fully abandoned themselves enters this exact state of rest. They aren't frantic anymore. They aren't worried about their spiritual performance or checking their moral rearview mirror every 5 seconds.
They are couching.
They are crouching in absolute safety.
And the text asks, who shall rouse him up?
And Guyon answers quite simply, no one. She writes, who dares rouse him? She implies that even if all the chaos of hell were to rise up against this person, it couldn't disturb their internal peace. Because their peace isn't based on their external circumstances anymore. It's based entirely on their position. They are fixed.
She even connects this to the incarnation, right? The image of a baby.
She does. She draws a really beautiful parallel to the divine word resting in the womb. Just as the lion rests in its den, the divine presence rests in the soul of the believer. It's a picture of total safety and containment. It is the exact opposite of Reuben's splashing boiling water. It is heavy, still, dangerous rest.
So we have gone from the unstable water to the resting lion. But Jacob isn't quite done with Judah yet. He talks about the scepter in Shiloh, Genesis 49, verse 10. The scepter shall not depart from Judah until Shiloh comes.
Now, this is traditionally read as a classic messianic prophecy. But Guyon internalizes it completely. The scepter represents dominion. But you have to ask, dominion over what?
Usually a scepter means ruling over neighboring tribes or enemies, right?
Yes, but in the interior life, the enemies are all inside. The scepter represents dominion over one's own desires, one's passions, and the ego. The person who walks this path becomes the master of their own house. They have an internal peace that rules their emotions.
But then it says, until Shiloh comes. And Shiloh translates to peacemaker, right?
Yes, and here's where Guyon introduces a really radical almost backwards idea. She says, when Shiloh comes, when that divine peacemaker is fully formed within the soul, the kingdom is actually taken away from you.
Taken away? Wait, I thought we wanted the kingdom. I thought the whole point was to get the scepter and rule ourselves.
We do want it, but we don't want to be the ones ruling it. She says the kingdom is taken away in the sense that the individual self no longer rules. The self completely abdicates the throne. The divine takes full possession.
Ah, I see.
So you no longer own yourself. The peacemaker owns everything inside you. The scepter departs from your hand because the true king has arrived. You don't need to govern yourself when the absolute ruler is already in the room.
That is a profound shift in how you view personal growth. It's not just about me getting better at ruling my life, even with help. It's about me handing over the keys entirely and getting out the driver's seat.
It is the exact difference between saying, please help me do this, and saying, please do this as me.
And that leads perfectly into the next set of images, which are all about this total, messy loss of self-ownership. We have the vine, the donkey, and the wine. Genesis 49, verse 11. Binding his foal unto the vine, and his donkey's colt unto the choice vine, he washed his garments in wine, and his clothes in the blood of grapes.
The imagery is getting really thick here.
It is. I mean, washing his garments in wine. Practically speaking, that is a terrible way to do laundry. You would stain everything red. It would be completely ruined.
Exactly, and that is exactly the point. Spiritually, it's about total saturation. The wine here represents that divine lifeblood. Guyon interprets the garments as our external life, our virtues, our good actions, our reputation. To wash them in wine means to submerge them completely until they lose their original color.
And this connects to her concept of the loss of self-virtue, right?
Yes, and I have to say, this is a very tricky concept for some people to wrap their heads around today. We are culturally trained to accumulate virtue. We want to be able to look in the mirror and say, I am a patient person, or I am a generous person. We want those traits on our personal resume.
Right. We want the credit for being good.
Guyon argues that the spiritually advanced soul no longer claims any purity or virtue as their own. They literally don't look at themselves and say, wow, I was really patient in traffic today. Good job, me. They recognize that any good thing happening in them is just the divine flowing through them.
So if I'm acting patiently, it's not actually my patience at all.
Exactly. You have lost your virtue in the sense that you no longer claim any ownership of it. It's like those clothes in the wine vat. They take on the color of the wine.
Yeah.
If you are washed in the blood of grapes, you just look like the grapes. You don't look like your old self anymore.
She writes, and I'm paraphrasing the source here, that these individuals no longer claim any purity as their own. Whatever they have is in that divine source. It sounds like total bankruptcy of the self, but total wealth in the spirit.
And that is exactly why they are so safe. Think about it. If you rely on your own virtue, you are always going to be insecure. You'll constantly wonder, did I do enough today? Was my motive pure enough? But if your virtue is literally not yours to begin with, you can just rest. You are washed clean by being stained red.
Wow. And then we get this really weird, almost surreal detail about eyes and teeth. Genesis 49, verse 12. His eyes shall be red with wine, and his teeth white with milk.
It sounds a bit psychedelic, doesn't it? Like a Salvador Dali painting. But the symbolism is incredibly consistent with everything she's been saying.
Well, let's look at it. Eyes red with wine. Usually if someone has red eyes from wine, they're hungover or they're heavily intoxicated.
And intoxication is exactly the metaphor she wants here. The eyes represent the intellect. It's the way we see and logically understand the world. Guyon says the eyes red with wine represent the intellect becoming completely intoxicated with divine love.
Intoxicated logic. That's a fascinating phrase.
It means the mind isn't operating in a cold, analytical, detached way anymore. It is drunk on love. The knowledge is fully united with love. The person doesn't just know theological facts like they're solving a math problem. They feel the reality of it. They disappear into it.
So their decision-making process isn't sober and calculating. It's driven by this overwhelming state of love.
Yes.
And the teeth white with milk.
Well, teeth are what we use to process food, right? To break things down so we can digest them. But here, Guyon links teeth to our actions and our purity. Milk is the food of absolute simplicity. It's the food of childhood. And white is obviously the universal color of innocence.
So we have wine, which represents maturity and intoxication, and milk, which represents childhood and innocence, all in the exact same face.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. She is suggesting that the actions of this person, the way they bite into life, are completely innocent, pure, and simple. They aren't calculating every move to see what they can get out of it. They're acting with the pure simplicity of a child, fueled by that spiritual milk.
Mm.
They are highly sophisticated in their love, but incredibly simple in their actions.
It really is a striking picture of a completely transformed human being, someone who is fierce and unshakable like a lion, but entirely restful, someone who is intoxicated with deck love, but acts with the pure innocence of a toddler. Beautiful.
It is very beautiful.
Ah, there's always a but.
There is always a but, because getting there isn't easy. We have spent all this time talking about the goal. Judah is the picture of the finished product. But now we really need to talk about the process, the meat grinder you go through to get there. And for that, we have to skip ahead and look at Joseph.
Joseph, the famous dreamer, the favorite son with the coat of many colors. In Genesis 49, verse 22, Jacob calls him a fruitful bough, even a fruitful bough by a well whose branches run over the wall. Now that sounds lovely. Abundance, growth, providing shade.
He is lovely. Joseph represents those who have finally reached a high state of abandonment and are now genuinely bearing fruit. They are incredibly useful to the world around them. But, and here's the turn, immediately after this gorgeous image of fruitfulness, Jacob describes a brutal battle.
Yeah, right in verse 23, the archers have sorely grieved him and shot at him and hated him. That took a very dark turn very quickly.
This is where the rubber meets the road in her theology. If Judah is the sleeping lion, Joseph is the man actively under attack.
So who are the archers? In the historical story, Joseph obviously had literal human enemies. His jealous brothers, Potiphar's wife who framed him, but for the interior life map, who is shooting at us?
Well, in Guyon's own experience, and remember, she was literally imprisoned in the Bastille in France for her writings. The archers can certainly be real physical people, but they primarily represent internal realities, trials, intense persecution, and personal weakness.
Weakness is an interesting one to include. Usually we think of enemies as strong forces coming from the outside, but you are saying the archers can be my own internal flaws.
Absolutely. The archers can be your own severe limitations, your own moral failures, your crippling anxieties. They sorely grieve you, as the text says. Guyon points out that the truly abandoned person, the Joseph figure, is often completely surrounded by their own weakness. They feel besieged by it.
So it's not a victory lap.
No, this isn't the happy, shiny version of spirituality where every single thing goes perfectly right and you always feel great. This is a state of feeling pinned down under heavy fire.
So how does the abandoned person respond when they are pinned down? Do they shoot back? Do they dodge the arrows?
No. And this is the absolute key to her teaching here. Verse 24 says, "But his bow abode in strength." Now, if you're watching an action movie, you might think that means he held his bow steady, aimed carefully, and fired back, Rambo style.
Right, taking out the enemies one by one.
But Guyon interprets it completely differently. She says he takes his bow, which represents his own personal power and defense, and he puts it directly into the hands of the Almighty.
He hands over his only weapon.
He stays in a strength that is not his own. He doesn't panic. He doesn't try to fix the messy situation with Reuben energy.
That unstable water of self-effort.
Exactly. He doesn't start scheming. He stands perfectly firm in the absolute center of the arrow storm, and he lets the divine handle the bow.
And then there is this really specific phrase right after. The arms of his hands were made strong by the hands of the mighty God of Jacob.
Guyon translates this underlying idea as the loosening of hands.
Loosening. That feels incredibly counterintuitive. Usually if you make your hands strong, you grip tighter. You make a fist. You brace for impact.
Exactly. The world says strength is a tight grip. It's control. It's white-knuckling your way through a crisis. But Guyon says true spiritual strength is the profound ability to let go, to completely loosen the hands.
Wow.
She says this signifies the soul finally gaining real liberty. The soul life, meaning the ego, the desperate need to control outcomes and manage your image, has been crucified and resurrected. The hands are loosened because they are literally no longer grasping for control.
And according to the source, she says only after this loosening happens is a person truly fit to lead others.
Right. The verse continues, "From thence is the shepherd, the stone of Israel." She argues you cannot be a true shepherd, a safe spiritual guide for others, until your hands have been fundamentally loosened.
Why is that connection so vital?
Think about any leader who is still gripping. A leader who desperately needs to be in control, who always needs to be right, who is deeply insecure. What do they inevitably do to the people following them?
They micromanage them. They manipulate them. In a lot of cases, they crush them.
Exactly. If you are gripping the steering wheel of your own life with white knuckles, you will grip the people around you the exact same way. You'll be a tyrant, not a shepherd. But once your hands are completely loosened, once you fundamentally realize you aren't holding the bow anyway, You can lead with incredible freedom. You can become a stone of Israel, stable, safe.
That is such a crucial leadership lesson, even outside of spirituality. The absolute best leaders are always the ones who don't have a neurotic need to be in control.
Correct. They are stable precisely because they are built on the stone of Israel. Guyon emphasizes that this divine bedrock is the only safe foundation. If you build your spiritual life or your leadership on the sand of human invention, clever ideas, church programs, marketing strategies, it will completely collapse the second the archers show up. But if it is built on the rock, the arrows literally cannot destroy it.
Now, we need to move to perhaps the most controversial, or at least the most difficult to digest, part of Guyon's commentary, the double blessing. Genesis 49, verse 25. Jacob blesses Joseph with, quote, blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that lies under.
Heaven in the deep. This is a massive pivot point in her theology.
So blessings of heaven, I think I intuitively get that. Light, love, feeling a deep sense of presence. It's that warm, fuzzy feeling when you are singing a song and everything just feels perfectly right in the world.
Yes, Guyon calls this the passive state of light and love. It's when grace feels super obvious, you feel favored, things are going well, your prayers feel answered, it's wonderful. We all desperately want the blessings of heaven.
But then blessings of the deep that lies under. In the original Hebrew, that word for deep is teham. It's the abyss, the chaotic, dark waters under the earth. It sounds incredibly ominous.
It does sound ominous.
Yeah.
Guyon takes this and really runs with it. She interprets the deep as the internal hell.
Whoa, stop right there. Internal hell? And she is calling that a blessing.
Yes. This is the big aha moment of her map, and it's definitely the part that makes modern readers the most uncomfortable. She argues that for the mature believer, the deep lapidus, which consists of severe trials, temptations, spiritual dryness, the feeling of being completely abandoned by God, the sudden exposure of your own absolute ugliness, is actually a greater blessing than the heavenly feelings.
Okay, you are going to have to explain that to me like I am 5 years old, because if I am going through hell, if I feel dry, empty, or overwhelmed by temptation, my immediate assumption is that I did something wrong. I assume I am cursed, not blessed. How on earth is that a blessing?
Well, you have to think about the ultimate goal, abandonment, the total death of the self. Now, when you have the blessings of heaven, when you feel incredibly spiritual, holy, and righteous, what does your ego naturally do?
Honestly, it probably pats itself on the back. It thinks, look at me, I'm so spiritual today. I'm doing a great job at this religion thing.
Exactly. Spiritual success can actually feed the ego faster than anything else. You start to subtly trust in your own holiness. You start to think you are the actual source of the light.
Yeah.
But the blessings of the deep completely destroy the ego. When you are thrown into the deep, you feel incredibly weak. You feel totally incapable. You vividly see the darkness and selfishness in your own heart. It humiliates you.
It strips away every ounce of confidence in the self.
Precisely. The heaven comforts the self, the deep kills the self. And since the goal is absolute union, which requires the death of the self, the deep is arguably much more useful. Guyon says for those who know how to use this divine arrangement, this intense suffering is a tool of immense, unmatched value. It burns away the deep dross that the light just didn't catch.
So it's essentially a kiln. It's firing the clay under extreme heat.
It is. Guyon even uses a highly provocative phrase here. She talks about the utility of sin or the utility of temptation.
That sounds dangerous, the utility of sin. Is she trying to say that sin is actually a good thing?
No, she is very, very clear that sin itself is evil. But she is saying that the divine arrangement is so sovereign and so powerful that it can use the experience of your own absolute fallibility to save you. It uses your worst failures to make you genuinely humble. It uses the deep to make you utterly desperate. Think about it. If you were always perfectly behaved, always feeling heavenly, you wouldn't feel the need for rescue. You would just need a mirror to admire yourself in. The deep smashes that mirror into 1,000 pieces.
That completely reframes the concept of suffering. It's not just senseless pain or random bad luck. It's structural work.
It is the deep foundation digging for the eternal kingdom. And Joseph receives both. He gets the incredible highs and the crushing lows. He's a man of the mountain peak and a man of the dark abyss.
And this dual blessing also connects to the imagery of breasts and womb, right? The verse says, blessings of the breasts and of the womb.
Yes. Guyon draws a really fascinating distinction here between nursing and birthing.
Okay, unpack that for us.
Nursing, represented by the breasts, is the grace to feed and help spiritual children. It's the ability to teach, to comfort, to nourish others with what she vividly calls contemplative milk. It is a very gentle, sustaining ministry. Birthing the womb is the grace to actually produce new spiritual children. This is what she calls the apostolic state. It is a much more intense, fruitful power. It's the rare ability to bring entirely new spiritual life into existence, not just sustain the life that's already there.
And she says Joseph gets both of these.
Yes. He possesses what she calls Joseph's perfection. He can beget and he can nourish. He is the complete, fully rounded spiritual father. But, and this is vital, he is only that life-giving father because he survived the archers in the deep. You simply cannot birth life if you haven't been through the agonizing process of death.
That makes a lot of sense. Moving on to Genesis 49, verse 26. Jacob starts comparing his blessings to those of his ancestors. He says, "The blessings of your father have prevailed above the blessings of my progenitors unto the utmost bound of the everlasting hills."
This is a remarkably bold claim by Jacob. He is essentially saying, my blessings are stronger and better than Abraham's and Isaac's.
Which, on the surface, seems a bit arrogant, doesn't it? I mean, I'm better than Grandpa Abraham, the father of faith.
Historically, maybe it sounds that way, but allegorically, Guyon sees this as a description of the progression of the spiritual life. She links Jacob specifically to the concepts of faith and abandonment. She suggests that the path of deep abandonment leads to a much stronger, more durable blessing than just the initial stages of the covenant.
And that specific phrase, the everlasting hills, what does that signify on this map?
The utmost bound of the everlasting hills. This is the absolute finish line, the final summit. It represents the end of the spiritual journey. It is the total, irreversible destruction of all personal desire and the permanent, unshakable union with the divine.
The unshakable kingdom.
Yes. And here she makes a really interesting point about the ancestors. She says Abraham and Isaac represent the saints and the heroes who have gone before us. They are our examples. They are our supports. We lean heavily on their stories and their writings, kind of like how we are leaning on Madame Guyon right now. But they are not the goal. The goal is the eternal hills.
Meaning what, practically?
Meaning, eventually you have to let go of the examples. And this is a terrifying thought for some people. She says, once that profound internal union occurs, you exist only in that source. You don't need a mediator anymore. You don't need a human example to copy. You don't need a rule book to tell you how to be holy. You are holy because the source is fully operating in you.
The training wheels finally come off.
Exactly. We really like our gurus. We like our deep dive shows. We like our stacks of books. And they are good. They're absolutely necessary for a certain time. But they are not the final destination. The destination is direct, unmediated connection. As she beautifully puts it, when the ultimate reality comes, the shadows completely disappear. You don't need to stare at a map when you are finally sitting in your own living room.
So we have traced this incredible map from the noisy, unstable water of Reuben, through the resting lion strength of Judah, through the brutal trials and deep abyss of Joseph, all the way to the eternal hills. But the biblical story actually doesn't end there. We have one more critical chapter, Genesis 50.
The aftermath. The dust settles. Jacob dies. The big state funeral is over. And suddenly, the stark reality of the family dynamic comes crashing back in.
The brothers absolutely freak out. Genesis 50, verse 15. When Joseph's brethren saw that their father was dead, they said, "Joseph will perhaps hate us and will certainly requite us all the evil which we did unto him."
It is such a profoundly human moment. The buffer is suddenly gone. Dad is dead. Now they have to face the brother they literally threw in a pit and sold into slavery, who just happens to now be the prime minister of Egypt and arguably the most powerful man in the known world. They are terrified.
And Guyon says this specific fear stems from a fundamental misunderstanding of who Joseph has become, right?
Yes, they completely fail to understand the interior life. They judge Joseph by their own unhealed standards. They think, well, if I were in his shoes, with all that power, I would want absolute revenge. They are still operating on a purely transactional level. We did bad to him, so he is definitely going to do bad to us.
They don't realize that a person governed entirely by this higher state, a person like Joseph, possesses what Guyon terms generosity and the forgetfulness of injuries.
The forgetfulness of injuries. That is an absolute superpower.
It really is. A truly abandoned soul doesn't just grit their teeth and forgive. They actually forget. Not in a medical, senile way, but in a deep spiritual way. They hold zero record of wrongs because the self that was originally offended is dead. If you hit a corpse, it doesn't get offended and plot revenge. Joseph's ego is dead, so he literally cannot be offended.
Right.
So the brothers desperately try to manipulate him. They send a messenger saying, "Hey, Dad said right before he died that you absolutely have to forgive us." They play the dad card.
They invoke the God of your father. They are actively trying to use religion and family loyalty as a shield to protect themselves. It's very political. It is classic Reuben behavior scheming, trying to manage and fix the terrifying situation with their own effort.
And Joseph's response breaks my heart every single time I read it, verse 17.
Yeah.
And Joseph wept when they spoke unto him. Why exactly does he weep here?
Guyon suggests he weeps because he clearly sees how incredibly far they are from understanding him, and more importantly, how tragically far they are from understanding the divine nature. They think this is just a transaction. We sinned, now we pay the sign. Joseph knows this entire saga was a divine orchestration. He weeps for their sheer blindness.
And then he says those incredibly famous words, Genesis 50, verse 19. Fear not, for am I in the place of God?
Am I in God's place?
Yeah.
This is the ultimate final statement of abandonment on the map. Joseph is completely aligned with the higher will. He cannot resent his brothers because he sees the divine, not them, as the true author of his life story. If he took revenge, he would be putting himself in the judgment seat. He would be playing God, and he has permanently given up the right to judge.
And then comes the great reversal, verse 20. But as for you, you thought evil against me. But God meant it unto good, to bring to pass, as it is this day, to save much people alive.
This is the absolute capstone of Guyon's entire commentary here, the total sweeping sovereignty of the divine plan.
You meant evil, but God meant good.
Notice very carefully, he doesn't say, oh, you didn't really mean it. He fully acknowledges the horror of the evil. You meant it for evil. But he says a higher intention completely overruled theirs. And here, Guyon loops right back to that controversial idea of the utility of sin.
How does that apply to this specific moment?
She says the divine is so overwhelmingly powerful that it uses even human malice and betrayal to perfectly achieve its purposes. Think about the chain of events. If the brothers hadn't viciously sold Joseph, he never would have gone to Egypt. If he hadn't gone to Egypt, he wouldn't have been falsely accused and thrown in prison. If he hadn't been in prison, he wouldn't have met the baker and the butler and interpreted the dreams. If he hadn't interpreted the dreams, he wouldn't have been called before Pharaoh and made prime minister. And if he wasn't prime minister, the entire known world would have starved to death in the famine.
So the very act of evil, the brutal betrayal of the brother, was the exact mechanism of the world's salvation.
Exactly. The bad thing wasn't just magically fixed or band-aided after the fact. It was actively used as the primary tool.
That really spins your head around. It means that the person unfairly attacking you, the archer shooting at you, the brother betraying you, they are unknowingly working for your ultimate good.
That is the radical, paradigm-shifting perspective of the fully realized interior life. Literally nothing happens without permission. The abandoned soul accepts everything, even the horrific malice of other people, as coming directly from a higher hand.
Yeah.
They don't look at the mailman, they look at the letter.
The mailman.
Yes. The brothers were just the mailmen, delivering Joseph to his ultimate destiny. Why waste your energy being furious at the mailman? He's just doing his job, even if he's doing it maliciously. Joseph isn't staring at his brothers, he is staring past them at the one who sent them.
That is a phenomenal way to put it. It changes absolutely everything about how you view your own suffering. It's not senseless, it's deeply structural.
It is the necessary scaffolding for building the internal kingdom. These crushing things are used to humble a person into the dirt and then eventually exalt them. As Joseph says, the whole point was to save much people alive. The intense suffering of the one directly leads to the salvation of the many. That is the ultimate pattern.
And that brings us right back to the center of it all. This entire map, from Reuben to Judah to Joseph, is really just a map of the ultimate spiritual archetype.
It is. Reuben is the tragic failure of human effort. Judah is the arising of the unshakable inner life. Joseph is the suffering, surrendered, and reigning servant. Guyon's whole point is that your small, chaotic life is supposed to be swallowed up and become that life.
So we have covered a massive amount of ground today. We have waded through the noisy, unstable waters of self-effort. We have napped safely with lions in the mystic sleep. We've been shot at by internal archers. We have survived the crushing darkness of the deep. And we have arrived at the peak of total forgiveness.
It's quite a journey. Not an easy one, but a necessary one.
So what does this all mean for the listener right now? Maybe they are stuck in traffic or doing a pile of dishes or sweating at the gym. How do they actually apply this bizarre, beautiful 17th century map?
I think the main challenge is simply to locate yourself on the map.
Where are you right now?
Right? Are you Reuben? Are you furiously pumping the handle, trying to impress the divine with your exhaustive list of tasks? Are you burning yourself out with good works, only to find that your motivation is as unstable as water, the second things get hard.
Or are you ready for the mystic death?
Which is the dramatic term Guyon uses. It sounds terrifying, but it's really just the death of your exhausting need to be the hero of your own story. Are you finally willing to lose your own soul life, your rigid plans, your carefully curated reputation, your endless need to be right, to find the true life where the divine acts entirely through you?
It's the profound difference between working for God and letting God work as you.
Beautifully put. Is the divine just a distant destination you're desperately trying to reach, or is it the very mechanism carrying you there?
Your only job is just to be the vessel, to stop rowing.
To crouch down.
Yeah.
To rest. To loosen your hands from the boat.
To sleep the mystic sleep.
Yeah.
And on that final provocative thought, we are going to let you go. Go find a place to rest today, maybe not physically, but internally. Stop pumping the water handle. Let the lion take over.
Thanks for diving deep with us today.
It is.
For more spiritual resources, visit lokaken.ai.